And please forgive me if I speak a little fast. I'm from North Jersey originally, so like, the accent, we just talk in the New York minute. So, but I will be here throughout to answer any questions while we have time. And I will also make this presentation available to anybody who wishes to have it at the end of the presentation. I will be happy to email it to you, and I'll put my email in the chat at the end, as well as it'll be up on screen for you to copy. So thank you again for your attention today. Again, my name is Mike Cooper. I'm the State Outreach Director for Smart Recovery USA here in Ohio. For those that may not be familiar with the program, fear not, we're going to go through a step-by-step of what Smart Recovery is and what it entails. Beginning with the name, Smart Recovery is actually an acronym. It stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. The emphasis being on the self-management and training components, which really sets us apart from a lot of different programs, but makes us very versatile at the same time. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So what is Smart Recovery? Well, our mission statement stands forth as a transformation method that helps individuals move from a life of addiction, substances, and negative behaviors to a life of positive self-regard and willingness to change. The self-acceptance component and the willingness to change to build that motivation within the individual is something that really makes Smart Recovery unique. We pride ourselves in molding our program to the individual's recovery needs, rather than the individual having to change for the program. Our versatility is by far our greatest strength, and we'll get into a little bit about what that means moving forward. So how it works, we use mutual support meetings like any other program, but our basis is much stronger online than it is in person, being that we started as an online component in 1994. The online community spans across the entire country and even across the entire world. We'll get into that in our reach in a little bit. Features meetings from Monday to Sunday, almost 24 hours a day, with 24/7 chat available and message boards with particular forums ranging from discussion, agenda, tools, and specific meetings, women's only, and particular demographic groups such as men's, LGBTQIA, veterans and first responders, so on and so forth. Our practical toolbox and skill techniques are available free for anyone who comes on our website at smartrecovery.org. So this way, even if you are not familiar with the program, you're able to look at our tools, even download and copy some of the worksheets to begin the process on your own to find out a little bit more about it, about how we work. With this component being so hands-on, the participants from day one really get the opportunity to design their own recovery program for what works best for their particular goals. It creates a more balanced and purposeful and fulfilled meaning to their recovery, because they know they have a say and a actual hands-on approach to what goes on in their steps towards recovery with the guidance of those that have been trained as facilitators within our program. So a little bit about the history. As I mentioned, we were established back in 1994 as a completely 100% online program. Initially, we've really moved into the face-to-face component in the last decade and a half, which is why we're not as well known as many of the other programs, but we are working on that every single day. One of the reasons why my position was created was for that very reason, to do things like we're doing today, bring awareness about the program and help others become interested in its components. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization and volunteer driven. We have over 4,000 volunteers in this country alone, and that number grows literally every day. With less than 20 employees, including myself, which are all mostly based right here in Ohio. Our main headquarters branch is right there in Mentor. So we are Ohio hometown, which is why I moved from the glorious empire of New Jersey all the way out here to be a part of this. So this is what brought me here. So we do have over 3,500 face-to-face mutual support groups and over 250 monthly online meetings. Those meetings are national, featured on our community online website. So we have local online meetings available as well as national online meetings. So we create a really big variety for those that may not be able to meet the time requirements or so on and so forth. For local meetings, there's always the online national meetings to make available. Our biggest goal is to make sure that we are meeting the participants where they're at and where their needs can be fulfilled, as well as any of the volunteers. One of the things that we are very proud of is, as you all are very much aware, how hard the medical community was hit due to the recent pandemic. The recovery community in general was hit rather specifically because of the isolation effect that was caused for many of the participants who were suffering from addiction disorder or maladaptive behaviors or mental health issues, lost a lot of their free resources and locations due to restrictions or close downs caused by the pandemic. Well, Smart Recovery answered that call very quickly by converting over 600 of our face-to-face meetings to an online platform, free of any charge, which still remains today to our volunteers and participants, to make sure that those resources were still available. This happened within the first 30 days of the pandemic, which is something that we are very proud of. Now, a lot of those meetings still maintain their virtual connection because we've grown a huge community from the virtual aspect that we've gained, but we're now able to create a hybrid model by being able to bring that face-to-face model back, as well as broadcast online simultaneously. So that's a new component that actually we were able to build thanks to the pandemic. So we were able to get a silver lining out of this horrible situation, which is something we're very proud of. So how does Smart Recovery's fundamentals work? Well, we start with what we call the Smart Recovery 4-point program. So this is not a linear point system that you may be used to in traditional programs such as 12-step. Our 4-point program works more as a guide for our participants to utilize these components and these mentalities and mantras to help them utilize the skills that they learn from Smart Recovery in particular situations within their recovery lifestyle. Point 1 that we use is building and maintaining motivation. Point 2 is coping with urges and triggers. Point 3 is managing thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And point 4 is living a balanced lifestyle. And I'm going to get a little bit into what these particular points are in specificity in a moment. The handbook is organized to design around these 4-point components. So no matter what tool or skill you're using, we have an explanation as to which point they correlate with. So this helps the participant identify certain situations and events that go on in their lifestyle and where they correlate with the point system that we follow. So a bit about our global recognition. Not only, as I mentioned, are we well known here and utilized in the United States, but we're featured in over 26 countries nationwide with 3 other international headquarters, the UK, Australia, and Canada. So we have a lot of global recognition and a lot of support from federal and local governments that have learned to utilize our program, as well as the medical community. And this is something that I'm particularly proud of working as a professional in the field. Our medical community growth is growing every day. The best hospital rankings that's put out by US News features some of the more prominent hospitals that utilize our program. But what I'm very proud of is now that I'm in Ohio, and I love to see what the growth has done since I've become an outreach director here last year in August. So we've gotten, since I begun my outreach here in Ohio, we broadened our reach within Ohio with a partnership with Ohio Moss, gaining meetings and training programs in North Coast, Athens, Twin Valley, psychiatric state hospitals, as well as St. Vincent's Charity Hospital in Cleveland, and the Wade Park VA, which as a veteran myself has been something very close to my heart to bring this program to the veteran community. We just started a new meeting at the Stella Morris Recovery Center in Cleveland, as well as established referral programs with Windsor Laurelwood and Eleanor Health. So we're growing very, very rapidly, and we're very proud of that because a lot of people see the benefit in the multilateral approach to building a well-balanced recovery program for their participants and clients. So who is Smart Recovery good for? Who are these clients I keep speaking about? Well, honestly, we haven't found a limit to who that can be. The program is so versatile that it really fits into a lot of different demographics, as you can see from the slides here. I personally work with family and friends groups and family and friends meetings because I am also a family and friends facilitator. Courts and governments is something that I am partial to. Obviously, I have a background that unfortunately included incarceration during my time of alcohol use and going through that system without the proper support or the aftercare that I was eventually found essential for maintaining long-term sobriety. So we found that this program works very well with those communities, as well as school and universities for prevention methods and awareness. And as I mentioned before, the veterans and first responders are very keen to our program because it correlates with our mentality and mindset for training and practicality usage of how to overcome obstacles. So it is this program is very responsive in that community, especially, which is why our national meetings have grown now to over 4 different countries around the world to include veterans and first responders in their national programs. So how SMART's a little different from what you might recognize from other recovery groups? Well, we are, as I mentioned before, an evidence-based program, which means we're always evolving. We're not just stuck in a singular mindset of just based off of science. We use what works for our participants. And not only is it grown from the medical community, such as professionals and students like yourselves, but also from the participants' word of mouth. We utilize what works for them and incorporate that into our knowledge and our base set. So this way, we use our lived experience to help grow this program to benefit others who may come in. Because we know that even though we share commonalities in addiction, how we reach our recovery goals can be extremely different, even for those that suffer from the same addictive disorder. So we want to make sure that we incorporate as many tools as possible to give our participants options to reach their goals. We are an abstinence-oriented program. Now, sometimes I get a lot of confusion about what that means. People will be confused. Well, if you're oriented, does that mean you promote moderation? Absolutely not. Smart Recovery is an abstinence-based program when speaking about external substances, such as drugs and alcohol. The reason we say oriented is because we approach many different types of disorders, including mental health disorders and disorders that we cannot be completely 100% abstinent from, i.e. eating disorders. We handle many eating disorders or sexual maladaptive behaviors in Smart Recovery, as well as PTSD and trauma. So instead of doing an abstinence approach, we create balance, healthy balance, and disruption of the irrational thought process that creates the maladaptive behavior. So that's why we use oriented instead of based, because if we were to use based, it would alienate those participants who have disorders that are not able to be completely 100% abstinent. But as far as drugs and alcohol, we have a firm stance that we are an abstinence program because we are evidence-based, and evidence shows that abstinence is more effective than moderation for those suffering from addiction disorders. We are 100% MAT friendly because as long as it is under the strict guidance of medical professionals and it's part of the participant's treatment plan. The First Amendment adherence, as I mentioned before, is something that is very near and dear to my heart, because one of the movements we are trying to make sure that we are stemming around the country is that options are presented for treatment for those who are incarcerated for drug-related crimes and then mandated into treatment programs, that they are not given a do this or else mentality towards their recovery. As someone who went through the penal system, I know when you treat recovery as a punishment or consequence, it is far less effective than when you are able to present it as an option of growth and rehabilitation and reentry into society. So we are working very hard with courts around the country, not just here in Ohio, but across the entire nation, to make sure that the First Amendment adherence is heard through not only federal courts, but local courts as well. And the self-empowerment aspect of Smart Recovery is something that I think cannot be understated. Our participants are very proud of their growth, and that confidence helps gain their self-assurance and acceptance of who they are, and that they are more than just their addiction. They are more than just the disorders that they suffer from. They have a whole life, a whole story, and a whole sense of being beyond the labels that they are stuck with. And we'll get into that a little bit in the next couple of slides. So speaking on our stance, our disease model, we took a survey back in 2017, I believe it was, which is when I started with Smart 5 years ago. And approximately 40% of all Smart participants do believe that this is a disorder and disease. Another 40% believe that it's not, that it's just completely psychological and individual based. 20% wouldn't even get involved in the argument. They didn't care. The good news is that this program works regardless. These tools and techniques don't ask you to make a stand on any type of belief system. The same goes for spirituality. Whether you are a spiritual person or somebody who is agnostic or atheist, this program still works. Your choice is what matters. If spirituality is something that helps you move forward in your recovery progress, by all means, we incorporate it with our tools and techniques that go towards our mindfulness and spirituality growth. If it is not something that helps your participants or clients, we don't encourage it. We only encourage what works for the participants using the program. Hence the fact that this is a very, very augmentational program to whatever the client sees as effective. As I mentioned before, we are 100% MAT friendly as long as it is followed by the medical professionals' rules and guidelines, and personal labels are something that we discourage, believe it or not. Now, I do understand, being that I do practice multiple types of recovery, there are many individuals that find their labels empowering, right? They use that as a reminder of what they're going through, who they are, and what they've conquered. And that's wonderful. If whatever gains strength for you in your movement, absolutely use it. But what we do is we encourage everyone to take personal accountability, not to expect others to do what they're doing just because it works for them. So for many, myself included, labels are very stigmatizing. And for the general public who does not have a very good handle on average of what addiction is and what the disorders entail, labels can be very stereotypical because you can be put into a box and shut off before you even have a chance to identify who you really are. So we don't encourage labels unless they are absolutely useful to the participant themselves. Quick lesson on how that learns. If you look at this slide here, one of our participants going from 13 years of age all the way into their 40s, you can see what are some of the labels that they've experienced in their life, and their participants starting at 13 years old being labeled as a problem child because of their ADHD, their clinical depression, and their early use, introduction to drugs and alcohol, being in an urban environment, dropping out of high school by 18, arrested by the time they were 23, moving through a lot of bad jobs and bad situations, drinking and using more alcohol, more substances as time went on, and then being arrested multiple times. Their lifestyle, if you look at these labels, such as repeat offender, deadbeat dad, user, soulless, drunk, alky, the picture that you can gain from this individual obviously can be very dark very easily. This individual is me, if you believe it or not. This story is what I went through from 13 to now. So if you had not known that, where was the picture that you were taking in your mind of what this individual would look like today? Today, I call myself a recovery, which is the label that's at the bottom of my screen, because I know how different that is for many people, and for myself, how that changes often. So recovery is how I like to live my life, because recovery is where I stand and proud of it. So that's the label I choose to use for myself today. So how do our meetings work, and how are they a little different? Well, Crosstalk is one of our key components, as well as facilitator training. Our facilitators are trained to lead smart recovery meetings. Now, we are not dictators. We do not tell people what to do. We do not give advice to be mandated to follow. We are guides. Our facilitators are trained in motivational interviewing to help with those techniques for individuals to find their own path, using those motivational interviewing techniques to guide them through our CBT and REBT-based work, such as using open-ended questions and positive affirmations, right? Reflective listening techniques to make sure that the participant not only knows that they are being heard, but they're being understood, that their story matters, that who they are matter, and what their desires towards their recovery matters. And how do we provide that platform for them to reach successful recovery the way they want their lifestyle balance to be? So our facilitators utilize those skills and techniques that they learn from their training course to be able to implement this into the meetings. And we utilize our first person experiences in our meetings to create crosstalk. So the facilitator isn't the person being the only one talking during the meeting. We encourage our participants to engage each other with check-ins and their discussions and agenda topics. So it's not just a facilitator leading by example. That example can be led through the I statements and lived experience of the individuals in the room. So the crosstalk component is also especially important for gaining and creating that mutual and voluntary social network of trust. So we don't have a mandatory sponsorship program, but we by all means encourage social connection within our community, but our connection is voluntary. We meet and choose to elect those in our circle and our hula hoop and locus of control from choice. And that is something that's very important for those who may not be comfortable with a very, very large social connection. There are many people in our groups suffering from trauma and who are introverted, that interaction does not come easy. So that's why the versatility of having face-to-face and virtual platforms works out very well, because we are very inclusive for all who may be suffering. Language is very important. As I mentioned before, we utilize I statements. We do not speak for the group within Smart Recovery. As I showed in the last slides, labels are optional. Now, this is something I am definitely proud of, is our word exchange tools about discouraging the use of absolute statements. Words like have to, must, and can't only create one option, one pathway. What happens if that doesn't work? For many people, it's very discouraging. That go back to one and stage zero aspect is very defeating for a lot of people. We don't believe in that. Just like in any training aspect, if we make a mistake, we analyze what went wrong. How do we fix it? How do we make it stronger? And then move on from that current position. We haven't lost the information that worked well before the mistake. So why pretend that it's not there? In training, we don't do that. In our military groups, we bring that up very often. In basic training, we all make mistakes, but it's not like we go back to week one to start over. We utilize what we know and then what went wrong and augment that to create a stronger platform. So in case the mistake happens again, we're prepared for it and stronger from it, not weaker because of the experience. We discourage war stories, drunkalogs, and glorifying the past and romanticizing, because evidence shows that there is very little use in progress when doing so. We all come from our particular hells when it comes from addiction disorders. We don't need to glorify that behavior because we're all well aware of it. What do we want from that behavior for our new future and our present lives in recovery? That's what we focus on SMART. SMART is about progression. It is a progressive program to help individuals move forward in their recovery goals. So as I mentioned before, CBT and REBT is a base model of what many of our tools are based on. Since I am speaking to a bunch of geniuses here, I am not going to get into what that's about because you guys already know it. But just know that many of our tools do focus around CBT or REBT, but that's not all we use. Many of our tools come from holistic or DBT approaches, as well as spiritual approaches, and which we've incorporated from other programs, which I'll get into in a later slide. So let me get into our point system in a little bit more depth really quickly. Maintaining motivation is our point one. And some of the tools that we utilize with our participants is teaching them about recovery, teaching them about what it means to live a lifestyle of recovery, the difference between sobriety and recovery, and enhancing that growth process by building that motivation, using tools like their hierarchy of values, what's important to them, what's worth fighting for, using that to create a tangible change of plan, where they are now, their short, mid, and long-term goals, keeping them under the SMART formula, right, which we call specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals, and keeping within that formula to make sure that they're achievable. Working tools like our cost-benefit analysis, so we understand the pros and cons of our decisions, and to go beyond that, to utilize the long-term and short-term gains and consequences of those decisions. So there's a full perspective of the choices that we make. Point two of coping with urges, Smart Recovery has a lot of crisis management tools when we are in the thralls of a major urge or craving, such as our DEADS tool, which gives the participant many different types of options to escape the urge. Disputing irrational beliefs is probably the workhorse of Smart Recovery because it is the fundamental around many of the CBT tools we use. We teach our participants how to practically and rationally dispute harmful thought processes, from racing thoughts to harmful self-destructive images. We utilize a very simple technique to help individuals analyze whether or not a thought pattern is rational or irrational by asking ourselves three simple questions. Is the thought pattern based in logic? Is there any fact that can back up the thought that I'm having? And most importantly, is it helpful to myself and my goals in my recovery? So when we utilize these tools, not just in recovery, but mind you, but in our lifestyle, we gain that training and confidence from repetition of using this, that we can respond to situations rather than react to them, and not rely on our white knuckling or instinct to get us through these urges and cravings, and be confident when these things arrive rather than face them in fear. Managing thoughts, feelings, and behavior is also a critical component. Unconditional self-acceptance is my personal favorite tool because it is what's helped me to move away from self-worth and self-esteem, which can be motivated or influenced or manipulated by external forces. My acceptance comes from me alone and from what I have learned from my knowledge of my recovery and my past, and it incorporates who I am as a whole. The damage of using absolute statements such as musting and backing myself in a corner. Utilize this quick example for example of how well this works for participants who may say, I have to go to a meeting, for example, which correlates on a consequential or almost a damning factor. Instead of using have to go to a meeting, try using choose to go to a meeting. By using that simple change, that puts the power back into the hands of the participant because they're making the choice. Even if they're mandated to go to the meeting, they're still making the choice to adhere to those mandated rules to do the right thing. So by the power of choice, it helps them gain that self-confidence that this is in their control. So we also learn to recognize relapse triggers before they happen by keeping tools like an urge or trigger log, so we can identify the problems before they start and stop them before it ruins our goals towards our sobriety. And finally, my actual personal favorite tool is the balanced lifestyle tool. Because for me, when I removed my addiction disorder, there was a very big void where that used to live. For me, after my very short educational career and before I joined, after the military, I worked in the entertainment industry. I was a restaurant manager, an event coordinator for many, many, many years, as well as a bar manager. So my life revolved around my addiction. Once that was removed, I didn't know what to do with my life and how to be positive in recovery. So learning how to do that is one of the things that we incorporate into our Smart Recovery program. How to enjoy life and desire recovery, not just feel like it's an obligation. We create things like our VACI tools, our vital absorbing creative interests, finding new social circles and activities that are healthy in our recovery lifestyle. So we do not gravitate or romanticize about our past. We learn to long for our present and our future, so that we do things such as that to create that balanced lifestyle. But so by using all these points, we incorporate an entire package for recovery. Now, what we're also very proud of in Smart Recovery is that we've utilized these very core concepts to create very specific programs for different types of groups, one of them being our family and friends group. Now, this portion of Smart Recovery is catered specifically to the family member or friend or concerned loved one, not the person suffering from addiction. They are actually not part of this group process. We use the CRAFT system with family and friends model, family and friend participants, developed by Dr. Robert Myers, which stands for Community Reinforcement and Family Training, to help improve the quality of life of the family member. Let them know that they are important too. Their self-care matters by incorporating the oxygen mask theory, as like we call it. When you go to an airport and you get on the plane, they go through the speech about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first in an emergency before your children. Being that if you're not taking care of yourself and something happens to you, how can you possibly take care of the loved one? So we learn to create a component or environment where that the loved one is taking care of themselves and learning healthy means of communication and transparent boundary setting with the person suffering from the addiction disorder, even if the person in the disorder, suffering from the disorder, does not wish to go into treatment. We have seen that our evidence shows that by following this model, it helps that person realize the benefits of going into treatment by the loved ones stating what is important to them and not confronting them in a obligatory blaming method about their addiction disorder. So these are just some of the key components about what we teach with our family and friends model, being confrontation, being one of the biggest motivational killers. And point one of our program is building motivation. Take that motivation away from someone. You can force them into treatment, but long-term sobriety is less likely. So by a mutual understanding of positive communication, no nagging, no ultimatums, no pleading, no begging, no enabling, but mutual compromise and understanding the benefits of both sides and what each side wants and understands, there can be long-lasting sobriety and balance between the two relationships. We've modified our language to reach the young adult and teen population because we understand that their needs are different than ours. A lot of what that program goes into is prevention methods and awareness. Where are the danger signs that lead us towards that addictive behavior? You know, many children that suffer from mental health disorders or emotional disorders are prone to getting into self-medication through drugs and alcohol. So we help teach them about these warning signs and where those situations may lie, where the dangers are and how to avoid them comfortably without putting themselves in risk of being alienated or singled out by their peers. So it's a mutual beneficial lesson plan that we put together for the youth and teens, as well as the families that are involved with them. So everyone understands not just how to deal with the addictive problematic behavior that may exist now, but also to prevent further problems later on in life. And then one of my personal favorite spinoffs is the successful life skills. This is a way that we have taken all of our core values of Smart Recovery and turned them into a very composite and specific 12-week course that teaches an individual about the core fundamentals of locus of control and our CBT tools. Using this format, we can utilize this in a lot of short-term medical programs like detox centers, or 30-day rehabs where they can utilize this program inside and outside as aftercare. Once completed with this program, they receive a certification and competence that they understand not only their recovery, not only their addiction or maladaptive disorder, but ways to combat it. And they can follow up with aftercare much more confidently in evidence-based recovery programs because they have a full awareness of what the program is completely about by completing the Successful Life Skills workbook. What's good for the medical professionals or treatment professionals that may be given this program, there is a survey in the beginning and the end of the course that the participant takes about their own locus of control, where they first initially understand it to where they are at the end and how far they've grown. So there's a way of there's a good sense of measurability of where the program and how it's impacted the participant by utilizing the SLS program. So one of my favorite components about this as the outreach director here in Ohio, birthplace of AA, right, is how we work towards recovery augmentation. My catchphrase is we are stronger together. Why? Because we are. There is no such thing as too much support. I myself utilize many, many different techniques from many different programs. We found that the wisdom of combining multiple programs and enhancing a participant's recovery to utilize not only what's going on in their particular program, but a multilateral approach by combining different resources helps tremendously. 12-step and SMART does work well together. I don't care what you have heard. We have about 31% of all SMART recovery attendees, that is worldwide, by the way, that statistic was taken, say that they use other forms of recovery in conjunction with their SMART recovery tools and techniques. That is including 12-step. So that is something that we are very, very proud of. And we've designed full packages on how that works. One of the things that we are also most proud of is that this doesn't just come from the people that are involved with the program as professionals or volunteers. It comes from our participants. That statement at the bottom of your screen there is from an actual participant who has been part of the 12-step program for over a decade and has recently incorporated SMART recovery into their curriculum. He says, when I realized that I could use something like SMART's worksheets at the same time I was working with 12 steps, it took my recovery to a better place. And I personally know Luke, and I know how far he's grown. He's an actual facilitator for one of our meetings now. So it is really, really beneficial to what we do with recovery augmentation. And we've seen a lot of success, especially in some of those hospitals that I mentioned earlier that we are partnered with right here in Ohio. So all the resources that I've mentioned so far, including all the different spin-offs of our program, can be found on our website. As I stated, we are funded from starting from an online platform. So we make sure that everything is available there, including our bookshop where you can purchase our books and handbooks and worksheets, as well as download some of our tools and insights completely for free and be able to see some of our podcasts, recovery resources and essays, as well as meeting verifications that can be provided if your clients and participants are in legally mandated programs. And there is on-site training available for professionals like yourselves, 2 to 3 day training packages that we can do to make sure that your clients or even alumni can be certified as SMART recovery facilitators and start their own meetings, whether at the center or out in their communities. It's a very interactive program. It's a lot of fun. I've taken it myself. We make sure that just like in our meetings, the participants that are there learning are able to interact with their own growth and learning the process of becoming a facilitator. And as well as being highly interactive, there are live demonstrations as well as support and mentorship available after the training is complete. So this way you have guidance and support throughout the entire process until you are completely comfortable in augmenting the program into what you are doing for yourselves in your treatment facilities. So for more information for anything else that I've gone over in this these slides, I will make this presentation available, or feel free to take a look at our website or our online app, which we do have available for smartphones and Androids at smartrecovery.org. So thank you all very much again. It's a pleasure to be back here, and I'm available for questions if we have any. My information for contact is there on the screen, and I'll also throw it in the chat at the end.